We're talking about credibility for the next few minutes, and to illustrate credibility and what it can mean, let's think back to our childhood days, to the story of the shepherd boy who cried wolf. I'm sure you've all heard it, and I'll just remind you the highlights. Boy decides to have some fun with the villagers of his, the members of his village, and so while he's out herding the sheep and guarding the sheep, he decides to scream that there's a wolf there that is attacking the sheep. And so the men in the village, they grab their staffs and their bows and arrows and their slings, and they rush out to kill the wolf. Well, they get there and find that there is no wolf, and the little boy thinks this is really funny. So the next day he decides to do it again. He's bored, he's got nothing better to do, and they all come running out again and again find the wolf. Well, after several days of this, the men of the village get tired of it. So when the wolf does actually show up and the boy screams wolf, no one comes to his aid and the flock is destroyed. And the moral of the story is, when people tell lies, when they distort things, they lose credibility. And once they've lost that credibility, even when they tell the truth, no one believes them. For a speaker, credibility is just about everything. Why get up and make a speech if no one's going to believe a word that you have to say? So how do we become credible, even with people that don't know us? Well, first of all, let's define what credibility is operationally as far as the audience perception of a speaker. First of all, speaker must be competent, must be trustworthy, and dynamic. Those three things really go into helping to create this aura, this feeling of credibility that you're trying to create. And communication research has shown that if speakers are credible, then the overall audience will think they've done a good job. Now, I said overall, that doesn't go with every single member of the audience. And there's a reason for that, because each audience member looks at the speaker and makes a decision on whether the speaker is credible or not based on his or her own perspectives, beliefs, and personal experiences that they've had to deal with over time. For example, a couple of years ago, I was at a meeting at a radio station where I was working at the time, and times were hard, of course. Many businesses in the country were dealing with down times a couple of 3 years ago, and there were sales were tough, and there were rumors that there were going to be layoffs because we just weren't making budget. Well, about this time, a senior vice president with the corporation came to town, called us into the conference room, explained where the company was financially, and yes, times are tough, we all knew that, but he also specifically said that we're going to get through this. There are going to be no corporate layoffs. There are not going to be any layoffs in this station. This is a good staff. It's done very, very well for a number of years, and we'll get through this without anyone losing their job. Well, you can imagine the feeling of relief that everyone had. And then that relief went away just 3-4 weeks later when corporate announced that they were cutting staff by 25%. In addition to the cutbacks, the people that stayed with the station, well, yes, they got to keep their jobs, but they had to go from 40 hours a week to 50 hours a week, and their paychecks were cut back as well. Their hourly wage was reduced by a few dollars in order to help the company to weather this storm. So every single person in the building was affected in one way or another, either by being laid off or by being forced to, if you got to keep your job, you got to work more hours for less money. So if I ever hear this particular vice president speak again, or perhaps a number of, just about anyone from that corporate office, if they ever are speaking and I'm in the audience, am I going to believe them? Chances are no, because I'm not going to think that they're a credible person. They've already lied to me once. Why am I going to give them that chance to lie to me again? Other people who are in the audience that were not in that meeting, they may have an entirely different perspective. But for me, the credibility factor is gone. All right, now let's talk about a couple of those credibility factors that I did mention a few moments ago: trustworthiness and dynamism. Trustworthiness, of course, first of all, do not lie to your audience. Jason Stone, who's head of the public speaking department here at OSU OKC, notes in his lecture on credibility that a small lie probably won't get you, but the following cover-up and the accompanying lies that you tell to help the cover-up will do you in. And if you do get caught, that small lie is probably going to follow you around or dog you forever. So remember, just be honest with your audience. And there are a number of ways you can be honest, and we'll discuss some of those in just a moment. Then dynamism. That's energy. In several of my discussions on speeches that we both in class and on videotape, I've talked about being energetic, about looking your audience in the eye, about moving around and trying to get those barriers out of the way so you connect with your audience members. Also, I've told you, don't lean on the podium, don't lean on the desk, don't just shuffle around and look like you're nervous or really don't want to be there, and don't stand with your hands in your pockets or hanging down at your sides. Use your hands, use gestures so that you come across as, again, you're being credible, you're being active, you are trying to connect with the members of your audience, and that all ties into this idea of being accepted and credible. So remember, be dynamic, smile, act like you can't wait for the audience to hear what it is you've got to say. Another factor of credibility that is often overlooked, or in some cases just forgotten altogether, is your introduction. And by that, I'm not talking about the introduction that you have for your speech. I'm talking about the introduction of you as the speaker. Make sure that the person who is going to introduce you has the information necessary to let the audience know that you are credible on this topic. You might remember, well, for example, here, if a U.S. senator is going to go out and he's going to speak on foreign policy matters, let's say at a convention, and let's say he's also a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Well, he's going to want to make absolutely certain that the person who introduces him and brings him to the podium tells the audience that Senator so-and-so is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That is going to give the audience some feeling that maybe this man actually knows what he's talking about because he's been studying it as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Another thing, you might remember back to the first time that we met in class face-to-face. I made it a point to tell you that I had taught public speaking at other universities, and also that I had been a member of the broadcast media for 35, 36 years. This was to enhance or establish my credibility with you, the class. So from these points, we can gather this: education, occupation, and experience. These are the credentials that you want to make sure that you present to the audience, because it can have a positive effect on your credibility as a speaker. Some other factors: non-fluency in message delivery, too many ums and uhs and slips of the tongue, or difficulties pronouncing words. These can all hurt your credibility. A steady speaking rate suggests that you're familiar with the subject and therefore you are believable. If you are really slow and you're barely able to be heard by the audience, it may go the other way. It may suggest that you really are very unsure of what it is you're saying, therefore they're not quite sure they can believe what you have to say. Citation of sources. You must have sources that are, and remember those 3 C's we talked about earlier. They've got to be current, your sources must be credible in themselves, and they must be comprehensive. Remember those 3 C's again, because you're going to see those on the final exam. I'll just tell you that right now. Another issue or factor is liking. If the audience likes you, again, if you smile at them, if you connect with them, if they like you, they're probably going to believe you. And then humor. Let's talk about humor. We've mentioned this before as a way to gain attention and keep people's attention throughout the speech. Well, it's also used to improve your credibility, because humor can improve liking, and we just said liking helps the audience believe you. Now, one final thing to bring up, and that's objectivity. More and more these days, I'm hearing people complaining about this news network or this station this particular reporter being biased. A specific example of this is going to be the station that I work for in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We are an ABC News affiliate, and we do use stories and sometimes special reports provided by ABC News and their reporters around the world. But we no longer carry ABC branded newscasts, and any story from ABC or one of its reporters that we carry, we have to snip out or edit out any mention of ABC News. And we also screen each story. We read through each story that ABC sends us before we put it on the air to make sure that it is not biased in some way, or possibly even could be thought of as being biased in some way. Now, this is because we go through all these, jump through all these hoops, because a number of our listeners believe that ABC News has a liberal bias. Without the changes that we've made, our station would be branded as biased by these same listeners, and they would go find some other station to listen to. So we try to make ourselves credible by cutting out any mention of this supposedly biased news source that we definitely use on a daily basis. Same will happen to you if your research and your thoughts don't fully explain the issue about which you are speaking. Let's say, for example, you're going to be giving a presentation on a need for change in your company's method of operation. This isn't a big speech, it's just to people in your audience is going to be people that you work with every day. You should definitely present all sides of your story. Tell them what you think and why it needs to be changed, and how this is going to help the company if these changes are made. But at the same time, you should also present any opposing thoughts in your speech and then answer them or address them in your speech. That way, that's going to indicate that you're objective and you're comprehensive in your work, and that too will enhance your credibility.